ACT math section. And today I'm going to go over a complete practice test. It's actually a test that was released this past month on the September month exam. So I'm going to try to work through every single problem and give you some coaching along the way on how to work those problems and some strategies and tips on how to work the problems. Okay, so that's what the plan is. I do want to first talk about a few topics before I get into the practice test. This is the practice test here that we're going to go over. I do have a TI-84 that I'll be using from time to time as we work through these problems. But the first thing that I wanted to talk to you about is, what does it take to get a bump in your score, right? So if you're watching this video, it's because you're trying to, I assume, get an increase in your scores. Probably not the first time that you're taking the ACT. So while watching a video like this is definitely a good thing, it can't hurt to get a brush up on some of the concepts and techniques for answering questions. But nothing, as you know, I'm sure by now, replaces practice, right? So leading up to taking an ACT or SAT test, you have to do lots of practice if you're going to bump your score. And there are lots of practice tests that you can get online for free on both tests, on the ACT and SAT. And you can also purchase third-party materials that will give you some teaching materials on how to do certain types of problems and give you lots of practice problems that way. And also, one of the things that I do with students is I coach the students on how to work the problems that they're struggling with. So doing that practice, but nothing replaces you doing the practice, finding out what you don't know and what types of problems you're struggling with, and then drilling on those kind of problems. And it doesn't hurt to get some coaching, right? Which is kind of what I do, one-on-one coaching on trying to bump that math score. But practice is the ingredient, whichever way you're going to go. I did want to also talk about a pacing strategy for you, because the ACT math section is a little bit more time intensive, a little bit more stressful for students than the SAT is. The formula sheet, or I should say the answer sheet that you use until they go electronic next year looks like this, right? So your test 2 of any ACT is the math portion of the test. And it's 60 minutes in length unless you have been approved for extra time. But there are 60 questions, 60 minutes. So you got about a question per minute. That can be a little bit stressful. But here's what I want you to do. I'm going to give you a couple of tips. Now, if you're a student that's maybe in the low 20s, you're trying to get up into the mid 20s on your score, then you really want to think about this test in 2 parts. You want to think about it in terms of questions 1 through 40, which is where you want to spend the bulk of your time if you're in the low 20s trying to get up into maybe the mid 20s. And you want to work as many of those problems as you can and not rushing through those, because these are the ones that you have the best chance of getting correct. The last 20, there will be some in there that will be familiar to you and that you could do, but the majority of those questions are going to be really super challenging for you, and you don't want to spend a lot of time on those. So your strategy is to spend, I recommend, about maybe 50 minutes on the first 40. And again, this is for a student in the low 20s trying to get to the mid 20s, maybe 50 minutes on those first 40, making sure that you're not making any silly mistakes. And then be very selective on which ones you attempt in the last 20 questions. And make a judgment within 5 to 10 seconds as you're scanning those last 20 questions as to whether you are going to try to work that one or not. And any that you don't get to because you didn't have time, because you skipped over those, you have a strategy of guessing that I'll tell you here in just a minute. But I do want you, even if you're spending 50 minutes on the first 40 and only 10 minutes on the last 20, I do want you to put your eyes on every one of the questions so that you could determine whether it's a question that would be easy for you. You don't want to get to the point where you totally ran out of time and you didn't get to look at the last 5 questions or the last 10 questions. You want to be able to look at all of them and make a choice as to whether you're going to work those or not. If you're trying to get yourself up to closer to a 30, then I would recommend cutting this back to like 45 minutes on the first 40 questions, giving yourself about 15 minutes on those last 20. And again, being selective, right? You will probably skip over some of those questions that look really super challenging or that you just don't have a clue on how to address them. But you will get more of those correct than somebody who's maybe in the lower 20s. All right. Because if you've taken this test, you know for sure the ACT, as you move through it, those math questions get harder towards the end. That being said, there will be some questions in here in the last 20 that are pretty simple. You don't want to leave those on the table and not get a chance to answer those. All right. Now, as far as a guessing strategy, many of you at least have heard this from me if I've ever coached you, or you may have heard it somewhere else, that when you are making guesses on one of these standardized multiple choice tests, you don't want to do what we call Christmas tree, where you just sort of randomly place the dots on your answer sheet. You want to be methodical. And that method is going to be where you pick a column at random, column, in this case, looking at this sheet, column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you make all of your answer selections in that one column. All right, so that is a statistically valid way to maximize your probability of getting the most correct. All right, so now those are pure guesses, right? If you had a question that you eliminated some answers, then you want to make an educated guess. But if it's a pure guess because you didn't get to it, you totally skipped it, then you just go straight down the line. And it doesn't matter which one, A, B, C, D, or E, column 1 through 5. Pick one, go with that column for all of your guesses. All right, so if you are here live with me, you can post comments. I'll try to keep my eye on the comment section over here in YouTube. If you are watching on YouTube, you can post a question there, and I'll try to keep my eyes out for that. All right, and again, my name is Mr. Rich if you are watching this. All right, that is the pacing strategy that I wanted to go over. Just a few things about resources that you need. What I recommend is downloading the formula sheet that I did post. You should see that posted as a comment here on this video in YouTube. This is that formula sheet that I link to and review the formulas and the concepts. Now, this says ACT and SAT, so this really is a good resource for either one of the math sections on those two tests. So you want to use that. The day of the test, of course, you're going to take in a calculator with you. You are allowed a calculator for the entire test. It can be a graphing calculator like this TI-84 that I have displayed here, or it could be a TI-30. But do take the calculator that you're most comfortable with, that you're most comfortable with using on math problems. And of course, the other resource you need is a practice test. So I know it's kind of late in the game now. Here it's Friday night before we take the test tomorrow. But you still have time if you want to take a practice test. I did link to a practice test that's online and the answers to that. So if you wanted to try that. Okay, so, but what I'm going to do today is I'm going to work through the latest test that was given in September. And this is it right here. I'm going to go pretty fast. I'll try to do some coaching along the way. And if you have any questions, please post them here in the YouTube. All right, here is the first question number 1. And remember, I'm expecting these first 10 questions just to be, wow, really super easy. Having said that, one of the things that I do when I take this test is I'm aware of the fact that I can make mistakes. So I am not going to let my guard down on any one question. I'm going to go back and make sure I answered the right question. I'm going to look at the most similar answer to the one that I've chosen and use that to try to make me think and convince myself that it's not that answer instead of the one that I've chosen. All right. So I'm going to be really aware of how I could be making mistakes as I go. This first question says, here's a function f of x, and they want me to find f of -2. Well, I know that that means they want me to plug in -2 for all of the x's. So when I do that, I'm plugging it in. I know that when I raise a negative number to an odd power, it stays negative. I'm not going to do this on my calculator. I know that 2 to the third is 8. -2 to the third is -8. So this is 3 times -8 minus 7. That's a -24. Minus 7. I'm going with -31. Okay, and I'm making sure, double checking my work here. Notice I'm not doing mental math on this problem, okay? I don't trust myself to just do mental math. I want to be able to check my work. So I am actually writing this out, plugging that -2 in parentheses and double checking my work. -24, it is a -7. I like the -31. I'm going to keep going. During a certain game, the probability of randomly drawing card A is 1/8. What is the probability of randomly drawing card that is not card A? Well, this just requires me to do 1 minus 1/8. The probability of something not happening is 1 minus the probability that it does happen. That is 8/8 minus 1/8. 7/8 is my answer. Problem 3. Dawn randomly selected 6 books from the teen library, read them, and then rated them as follows. And there's the ratings. Based on the sample data, what is the best estimate of Dawn's average rating of all books in the library? Okay, so hers was a random selection. All right, they just want me to find the average. So I don't know, I could do this in my head, but I'm going to get my TI-84 out and add these all together. And then double check that I entered them in right, 80, 30, 40. And there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There were 6 of them. So it looks like 43 is going to be my answer. I'm going to pull my answer key up just as we go to make sure that I don't make any silly mistakes. I'll check it as we go. So this is number 3, and we're good to go. And again, my check is, if I'm using my calculator, I want to make sure that I entered in those numbers exactly correct because I don't want to miss one of the easy questions. Let's keep going. Number 4. On a digital music player, there are 153 rap songs, 72 country, 14 jazz, 121 rock. Given that the player is set to randomly shuffle the song selection, what is the probability rounded to the nearest thousandth that the first song played will be a country song? Well, there's 72 country out of all of them. So probability, if they want me to calculate probability, I need to divide the number of successful outcomes, country, by the number of total possible outcomes. So I'm going to go straight to my T84 and make a fraction and put the country songs on top, 72. And then I'm going to add all of the songs. There are 72 country, 153 rap, 14 jazz, and 121 rock. It is 1/5, which is 0.2, which is interesting. And I go back and I double check. It was country. The first song is country. There's 72. Did I get them all in there included? And so I like letter H there. Okay. If you are watching live, drop me a note. Just say hi in the comments in YouTube so I know that I can read those comments. All right, number 5. A city bus picks up and drops off passengers according to the table below. The bus has 0 passengers before stop 1. After stop 5, there are 13 passengers remaining. How many passengers did the bus pick up at stop 1? All right, so after stop 5, there were 13 people. So I believe we need to work our way backwards. Well, after stop 5, if there were 13 people and he had just dropped off half of them, that meant there were 26 after he picked up stop 4. But at stop 4, he picked up 11, which would have meant he had I believe, 15. Right? Because if he dropped half off, let's see if that makes sense. So he started with 13, but prior to that, he had dropped off half. So we went to 26, 15, picked up 11 there. So 15 to 26. All right. And let's see. So that would have meant that if he dropped off half, then he would have had 30 right here. And then he picked up 3. That would have put him at 27. So if he started at 27, he picked up 3, dropped off half, picked up 11, dropped off half, and that ends at 13. I like that answer. I'm going to go with 27. Let's check it. Yeah, that's correct. All right. All right. I see AKIF posted. Thank you for putting that up there. All right. Number 6. What's the length in inches of the hypotenuse of a right triangle with a leg that's 8 and a leg that's 3? So this is a right triangle. I'm drawing myself a picture. One of the legs is 8, one is 3. So this is a Pythagorean theorem. It is 3 squared plus 8 squared is equal to c squared. So that is 64 plus 9 equals c squared. So that would be the square root of 73. So that's a sum of 73 equals c squared. So therefore, that hypotenuse has to be the square root of 73. Now, I'm thinking to myself, the only mistake that I could have made is if I was supposed to put maybe one of these as the hypotenuse. So I go back and double check. Leg of 8 and leg of 3, and I was supposed to find the hypotenuse. Okay, so I don't think I messed that up. So 6 is h. I have convinced myself. Yep, root over 73. Very good. Number 7, x is 100 and y is negative 20. X plus y is equal to the product of negative 5 and what number? Well, when you first read that, that's a little weird because, like, how am I supposed to figure this out? Well, first of all, I think what I want to do is I want to write an equation. I want to take the English phrase right here, knowing that this is my equal sign, and make an equation. It is saying x plus y is equal to the product of negative 5 and some unknown number, some other number. I'll put a z for that other number they want me to find. But I know what x plus y is. It's 80. They're asking me to solve this problem. So I take 80 divided by negative 5, and that looks like it's going to be a negative 16, right? So we do 80 divided by 5, but it's supposed to be a negative because that's a negative 5. And what number? So I'm going with negative 16. Let's keep it rolling. Checking my answers as we go here. All right, number 8. You can also expect to see on some of these tests this kind of thing where they invent a mathematical operator. They're saying that this operation is defined by this. And then they say if A is 5 and A, we'll just call it A cross B is 100, what's the value of B? Well, this is a really weird problem, but I'm going to just simply use this equation and replace that A with a 5. So that would mean then that I'm doing 5, whatever that symbol is, cross B, which would be then 5 squared, 25, times B. B is just comes over as B, and they're telling me that that's supposed to be equal to 100. Divide by 25, I think B is supposed to be 4. Did they ask for B? They did. B, it looks like, is 4. All right. We got it. Let's keep going. Number 9. All right. So for number 9, I have a line RT. Point S is on RT. The length of RS is 6. Yes, that's posted there. The length of ST is 16. I see it. What is the distance in centimeters between T and the midpoint of RS? Okay, so I need to get a distance from T over to the midpoint of RS. Well, the midpoint of RS would split that into 3 and 3. That looks too easy, but it looks like my answer is 19. From T to the midpoint of RS would be 16 plus that little distance 3, giving me 19. Number 10 is a matrix problem. Most of you watching this video probably have not done much with matrices at all in your high school math class. They have added it into our curriculum here in our districts here in North Florida. But prior to that, most students they got nothing on matrices. So if you want to watch some videos on ACT matrices, I would definitely do that because you can expect 1 or 2 questions. Now, this says, which of the following matrices is A minus B, given that that's A and B? Well, if you have to do addition and subtraction with matrices, it's quite simple. You probably would have guessed this is what you would do. You would subtract the corresponding elements. So I'm going to take -2 minus 8, and that would give me an element of -10 in the upper left. And that means I'm liking F and G. Here I have 6 minus 5, which would give me a 1. So it looks like G is going to be my answer. 3 minus 1 is a 2. -8 minus -4, -4. G is my answer. Number 11, one of the lines graphed in the standard coordinate plane below has a negative slope and a negative y-intercept. Negative slope, negative y-intercept. Where in the world is my axes here? There's X and there's Y. Okay, these two lines, N and R, have a negative y-intercept, and only R has a negative slope as well. R is the answer. Number 12, in a certain isosceles triangle, the measure of the vertex angle is 34 degrees. What is the measure of each of the 2 base angles? Well, isosceles triangles are triangles that have 2 congruent sides, 2 sides that are the same length. So if I draw that, they're talking about these sides being the same, and that's the vertex angle, the one that is in between the 2 congruent sides. If that's 34, that means that these 2 angles have to split the remaining degrees. So I'll go ahead and use my calculator here. And I'm going to take 180 minus 34 and then divide it by 2 to evenly split it. So I'm liking this answer, 73. Now I go back and I reread the question. What is the measure of each of the 2 base angles? 73, 73. Do those add up? 146, 34. They add up to 180. I'm liking that. 12 is J. 13. This month, Reed sold 40 figurines in 2 sizes. The large figurines sold for $12 each and the small for $4 each. The amount of money he received from the sales of the large figurines was equal to the amount of money he received from the sales of the small figurines. How many large figurines did Reed sell this month? Well, I got 2 sizes, large and small, and there were 40 of them. So that's my first equation right here, 40 total figurines. Well, the smaller ones were selling for $4 a piece. The larger ones were selling for $12, 12L. Okay, and then that was some amount of money. Now, they didn't tell us how much, right? Usually in a problem like this, which is a system of equations, they would tell us how much money they collected. But they did tell me that the amount of money from the large was equal. So basically, this equation needs to be modified. 12L is equal to 4S, like that. Those are my 2 equations for this system of equations. So I'm going to solve for S by dividing by 4 on both sides. So S is equal to 3L. And then I'll do a substitution. I'm going to take that 3L and substitute it in for this S. So I get L plus 3L is equal to 40. So 4L is equal to 40. So it looks like we got 10 large, and that's what we wanted. How many large? So I'm liking that answer. Before I leave, if he sold large, I'm going to make sure that this makes sense. That means he would have had to have sold 30 small. Would that have given them the same dollar amount? 4 times 30, 12 times 10, 120 equals 120. So I like that answer, 13A. Notice, students, how I'm not going to say I'm nervous, but I am always looking to see if I can verify my answer before I leave. Okay, and I did that. I double checked to make sure that that was going to work when I plugged them both back in. All right, Akif is giving us some answers here. Very good. Number 14, the 7th term and the 8th term of an arithmetic sequence are 4 and 12 respectively. What's the second term? Well, they expect you to know what the definition is of an arithmetic sequence. That is a sequence of numbers that are found by adding a constant number to each term in the sequence to get the next number. So what I mean by that is if you tell me the 7th term is 4, and then the next term, the 8th one, is 12, that means the number that's being added each time is 8. They would be adding 8 to get each successive term in the sequence. Well, that tells me then that I need to back up to get the second term. I have to go back from 4. I have to back up 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. I have to back up how many times? To 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. I'm going to back up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 5 times 8 is 40. I got to back up 40 units. Negative 36 is my answer. Now, I'm going to show you another technique there. It's this. Arithmetic sequences are linear functions. And so, therefore, what we could say is that that common difference from the 7th and 8th, which we got 8, that's like a slope of a line. And so what we can say is that our nth term of the sequence is going to be the first term plus 8 times n minus 1. That's what they taught you about arithmetic sequences. That's the nth term. And that 8 was the common difference that we found by going from 4 to 12. Well, what I want to know is what would have been the first term. So what I can do here is I can plug in the fact that the 7th term, when n is equal to 7, the number was 4. So the number was 4 when we had the 7th term, like that. So 4 is equal to the first term. 8 times 6 is 48. My first term, 48 minus 4, is negative 44. That would be the first term. What is the second term? It would be adding 8 to that, negative 36. So there's multiple ways to go about an arithmetic sequence. That's a couple of ways. Yeah, that's right. D is the common difference. You got it. N is the number of the term. Those of you that are in pre-calc, AP pre-calc, you've been doing arithmetic sequences, and there's even another formula that you can use on that. Number 15, the Cross High School girls softball team currently has a record of 14 wins, 11 losses, no ties. What is the least number of its remaining 12 games the team must win to finish the season winning more than 50% of their games? All right, so they've won 14 out of 25. So at this point in the season, they are at a greater than 50%. And now they're going to they have to play 12 more games. So that means they're going to get to 37, like that. So in that, they're looking for the least number of games out of the 12 to get more than 50%. Well, let's just start with the smallest, right? If they win only 3, that would put them at 17. That's not more than 50%. 5, 19. Is that more than 50%? I believe it is, right? 19 divided by 37 is a 51%. So they have to win at least 5 of those last 12 games. So 15 there is B. 16, an object is launched vertically at 49 meters per second from a 980 meter high platform. The equation for the object's height at time t seconds after launch is given by this, where h is in meters. What will be the height in meters of the object 6 seconds after launch? Well, t is in seconds, and they wanted me to stick 6 seconds in there. I am going to go straight to my calculator. Now, one of the reasons why I like a TI-84 is it knows the order of operations. So I know that we're not going to mess this up if I put it in here. So I did square the 6, negative 4.9 times 36 plus 49 times 6 plus 980. And I get 1097.6. Okay, I make sure that I didn't mess anything up here. Notice, students, I didn't have to put parentheses around that 49 times 6 because, as I said, the TI-84 is smart enough to know to use the order of operations. A TI-30 would not be smart enough. You have to use parentheses. Otherwise, it'll do everything straight from left to right. Okay. Let's make sure 16 is G. It is. 17. The first term of pattern A is 2. The rule to find each subsequent term is to multiply the previous term by 2 and then subtract 1. The first term of pattern B is 2. Okay, so we got 2 patterns that we're probably going to have to work through. So the first term here is a 2, and the first term here is a 2. The rule to find each subsequent term is to multiply the previous term by 2 and then subtract 1. 2 times 2 is 4, minus 1. Multiply by 2, 6, subtract 1. Multiply by 2, subtract 1. So it looks like that's what my sequence looks like. It says, what is the sum of the first 4 terms of pattern A and pattern B? All right, well, that's interesting. They want me to do both of them together. I don't know. We're going to find out. First term of pattern B is 2. The rule to find each subsequent term is to subtract 1 from the previous term and then multiply by 2. 2 minus 1 is 1 times 2 is 2. 2 minus 1 is 1 times 2. Okay, so we have this. That gives me 4 terms. 2, 4, 6, 8. That gives me an 8. 5, 10, that gives me 19. All right. What is the sum of the 4th terms? Oh, the sum of the 4th terms. Oh my gosh. 9 plus 2, 11. I was thinking the sum of all of the 4th. No, the 4th term. So it looks like 11 is our answer here. It is. Okay. Strange question. 18. Which of the following binomials is a factor of x squared minus x minus 156? Well, they want us to factor this. And since it's a multiple choice, I'm going to see which, and that's a rather large number, so I'm going to see which one of these divides into 156. So I'm going to take 156 divide by 13. Yeah, so it would be a 13 and a 12 for sure is going to be how I'm going to factor it, because one of them has to be positive and negative to give me a negative product of 156. And they need to add to be negative 1. So it needs to be negative 13 plus 12. That's how that would factor. The only one that's in my list is the x minus 13. So F is what we're going with, and it is definitely F. Let's keep going. Number 19. One of the following graphs is that of the solution set of the inequality 4x minus 2 is less than or equal to 10. Well, I'm not going to waste any time with this. I'm going to just go ahead and solve it. I'm going to add 2 to both sides of the inequality, and then I'm going to divide by 4. So I need to look for x less than or equal to 3. Here is x less than or equal to 3 right here. And the fact that it is a less than or equal to means that it has to be a darkened circle. If you had a problem where it was x is less than 3, then it would have had an open, instead of a closed circle, it would have been an open circle there on top of the 3. All right, let's check the answer there. 19 is B. 20. Let y be an irrational number. Which of the following statements about the value of 15y must be true? Well, you definitely want to know what the definition is of a irrational number. Irrational numbers are two types that you need to be aware of. You need to be aware that anytime you take the square root of a non-perfect square, you will get an irrational number. It is a decimal that never repeats and it never ends. And so that is irrational. The other type of irrational number would be a mathematical constant such as pi or the natural exponential called e. Those are also non-repeating, never-ending decimal numbers. So they are called irrational. Well, if you take a number times an irrational number, it's going to be irrational. So it is going to be G. And it is. Right. I mean, if you take 15 times square root of 5, well, I mean, why would that not be irrational? It's still, that's irrational. So multiply something that's not irrational times it's still going to be an irrational number. 21. One of the following equations represents the line of best fit in the scatter plot below. Which one? Well, there's the dots and there's the line of best fit passing through it. It looks like my y-intercept is a 1.7, positive 1.7. So A is no good. C, E, no good. And then it just comes down to picking the right slope. Well, the slope's negative, so it definitely cannot be D. I don't need to calculate the slope because that's the only one that has a negative slope with a positive y-intercept. So it has to be answer B. And indeed, it is. 22. Points 2, 6, 10, 14 lie in the standard coordinate plane. What is the midpoint of GH? Is there a midpoint formula? There sure is. But what I want you to know about midpoints is to find a midpoint, you simply average the x's and you average the y's. You add them and divide by 2. 2 plus 10 right here. 12 divided by 2 is 6. So I get rid of those answers. 6 plus 14 is 20. Divided by 2 is 10. Right here is my answer. 23. A machine blade in the shape of a right triangle is rotated about a mechanical shaft at high speed. The mechanical shaft is along the longer leg of the triangle. So there's the shaft right here. So they're going to rotate this blade around that shaft. In the diagram below, the figure on the left shows the blade at rest, and the figure on the right shows a bottom view of the blade in motion. One of the following solids. Okay, so this is going to be a cone. Right? They're just saying if you were to rotate that around, you would get a circular cone. That's what that's going to look like. And that's looking at the cone from the bottom in. So my answer here is A, 24. The sum of two numbers is 22. The sum of the squares of the two numbers is 260. What is the product of the two numbers? Well, I'm going to have to make a system of equations here. Sum of two numbers, x plus y, is 22. The sum of the squares of the two numbers is 260. What is the product of the two numbers? Well, I'm going to have to do substitution, I believe. I'm going to have to solve this top equation for either x or y. Let's solve it for x. It's 22 minus y. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and substitute that in for x right here. So this gives me 22 minus y squared plus y squared equals 260. Hopefully you have the shortcut of squaring a binomial, because we oftentimes in algebra have to square a binomial. I'm going to square the first. So let's do that. 22 times 22 is 484. I multiply the two terms and then times 2. So that's a negative 44y. And then square the last term, the second term, it's plus y squared. That's my shortcut for squaring a binomial. Square the first, double the product of the two terms, square the second. Plus y squared equals 260. I've got a 2y squared. I'm going to bring the 260 over, so I'm going to use my calculator and do 484 minus 260. I get 224. I have negative 44y, and then a positive 224. It's a quadratic equation, right? So I'm going to factor it, but I notice that there's a common factor here of 2. So I'm going to get rid of 2 by dividing through by 2 on both sides. That's now going to give me y squared minus 22y plus 112 equals 0. I'm going to factor it and get some answers. Now, let's see what we have here. Yeah, sum of two numbers is 22. All right, I need to figure out what two numbers multiplied to be 112 add to be negative 22. So I'm going to divide 112 by 8. And it is a negative 14 and a negative 8. The product is positive 112. The sum is negative 22. So it looks like I've got y equals 14, y equals 8. Let's see what that means to us in this problem. If y is 14, then x would be 8. If y was 8, x would be 14. Yeah, so the two numbers are 14 and 8. So multiply them, 14 times 8. 112. I have a feeling there's an easier way to do that problem. I really do. Not sure. Let's keep going. 25. Trapezoid. Let's make sure that's the right answer. I'm sure it is, but let's take a look here. 24G. Yeah. Okay. 25. Trapezoid A, trapezoid B are congruent and graphed in the standard XY coordinate plane below. One of the following transformations or sequences of transformations would map A onto B. Which one? All right. I think I'm going to just go through my answer choices. Reflection over the line. No, that's y. Reflecting over the line, y equals x. That's definitely not it. Reflecting over negative x, possibly. No, it doesn't look like it, because it would have to, that point, that corner would have to come to about right here. No. Rotation 180 around the origin. Well, if that were true, I would draw a vector from here, rotate 180, and that point would be about right here. So that doesn't look right. Reflection over the y, and then a reflection over the x. Okay, if I reflected it over that, it would look like this. And then, yeah, it's going to have to be a translation to the left. Yes, there it is, E. Not a reflection, because this will, if I flip it over that y-axis, which is answer D, it's not going to match up. So E ends up being our answer there. Next, a circle with its center at 5, 4 and a radius of 3 coordinate units is graphed in the standard XY coordinate plane. One point on the circle has a y coordinate greater than that of any other point on the circle. What is the y coordinate of the point? So my strategy oftentimes with geometry in the XY plane is I am going to make a sketch of the picture that I'm considering. And when I plot points on my sketch, I plot their coordinates on the XY axis. I don't put tick marks in terms of getting out there. I don't have to put 5 tick marks. I'm just going to say that's 5. That would be about 4. There's 5, 4. It has a radius of 3. So, and it's asking me, one point on the circle has a y coordinate. Okay, that would be What is that y coordinate? Okay, I think I see it. 7 is the answer. I would go away 3 units from the center. 7. Okay. Now, if you can think through that without drawing the picture, great. I don't trust myself till I make the picture and I look at it and realize the radius is 3. I would go up 3, right 3, left 3, down 3. That gives me my maximum value. Okay, 26 G. 27. For real constants ABC, the graph in the standard XY coordinate plane below is represented by an equation in one of the following forms. Which one? This is a parabola. You need to know for this test that when you see a parabola, it is a quadratic equation. It is an ax squared. I'm not even looking at the answers here. I know that that's what it has to look like. Or it could be in vertex form, and it could look like that. Or it could be in factored form. Right? That's pretty much the way, the 3 ways where x1 and x2 are the x-intercepts. Those are the 3 ways that we write quadratics. So parabolas are quadratic equations. Quadratic equations are parabolas. Which one? Okay, so didn't need to spend that much time on it. Has to be D. I want to make sure that I'm not missing anything, right? This is, that's a rational function. That's an exponential. That's linear. That's an absolute value with some transformations to it. So there we go. We got it. D is our answer here. It's quadratic. Next, Jared is driving home. He is currently 231 miles away from home. His car's fuel tank holds 16 gallons, and it's 3/4 full of fuel. Given that his car travels 22 miles per gallon of fuel, and he doesn't stop for fuel, how many gallons of fuel will be in his tank when he gets home? Okay, let's figure out how much gas he has. If he's 3/4 full, 16 times 3/4 is 12. 4 goes into 16. 4 times 3. He's got 12 gallons. He gets 22 miles per gallon, but he's got to travel 231 miles. Well, I think what we have to do is figure out how much gas he needs to go 231 miles. If you're traveling 231 miles and you're getting 22 miles per gallon, you have to divide the 231 by the 22 miles per gallon. So I'm going to take 231 and divide it by 22. He needs 10.5 gallons of gas. So he's got 12. He needs to use that to get home. I really do like the 1.5 right here. Make sure that I didn't miss anything on units. I think that's our answer. 28 is F. 29. In the figure below, 5 right triangles share a common vertex O. The legs of each of these triangles are shown dashed, and their lengths are labeled in feet. The point on each triangle that is farthest from point O is labeled A. Yes. Okay. B, C, D. A circle centered O with a radius of 10 will be drawn. Okay. Which of the following points is outside of the circle? Whoa. I just need to find these hypotenuses. Well, this is an interesting question. I know that 7, 7, that's a 45, 45, 90. That's 7 root 2. Would that be greater than 10? I don't think so. 7 times square root of 2. No, that's within 10. So it would not be outside the circle. This is a 3, 4, 5 with a 2 multiplier. So this would be 10. That would be right on the circle. Here I got to use, now it looks like E is going to be my answer. Because if that distance is 10 and that's 1, the hypotenuse has to be longer than 10. I'm going with E right there. Right. So my logic is on a right triangle, the hypotenuse, that's, oh, wait a minute. Yeah. This is not the hypotenuse, right? This is a leg. If the leg is 10 on a right triangle, the hypotenuse has to be more than 10. Not much more because that's only a 1, but it would be more. So it's got to be E. Yeah. All right. You got it there, Akif. 30, Albert won a contest for which he will be paid $1 on the first, 2 on the second, 3 on the third, and so on for 1 year. What is the total amount of money Albert will be paid in its contest? So this is an arithmetic sequence, and they want you to find the sum of the arithmetic sequence, and they happen to give you the formula. So what we have to do, we know that it is 365 days. So that's n. N is 365. We're summing up all of his winnings for the entire year. So that n will be 365. And we know that the first term of the sequence is $1 on the first day. That's what T1 is. So T1 is his $1. Now, how do I find how much he's going to win on the 365th day? I'm going to write an equation for the nth term of an arithmetic sequence. I'm going to take his first term, his first day's winning, which was 1, and the common difference is $1. And then we would multiply that by 365 minus 1. That's the formula for the nth term of an arithmetic sequence at day 365. It would really be, the formula would be this, be n minus 1. That's the formula. But we're talking about n being 365. So this is 365. I don't think we needed to go through that, but it's 365. So Tn, the 365th day, why did we have to do that? I could have just said it was 365. So in my calculator, I am taking 366, which is 365 plus 1. I will multiply that by n365, and then I will divide that by 2. So it looks like 66,795 is going to be his total winnings. Okay, so this is the formula. They did teach you this probably, I'm not sure when, geometry or algebra 1 or algebra 2, I'm not sure. But you got to know the first term of the sequence that's being summed, the last term, and then the number of terms. And there you go. Let's make sure that's right. 30. Yeah, Jay. 31. Tables of values for the two functions f and g are shown. What's g of f of 5? Well, start in the middle. What is f of 5? You go to where x is 5 and f of 5 is 4. So that means that we're finding g of 4. G of 4 is -5. C is the answer right there. 32 in the figure below, L is parallel to M, and the line intersects the line N intersects those pair lines. What's the value of X? These are same side interior, so they must add to 180. So we will add those together and get 4X plus 20 must be 180. That is 4X equals 160. It looks like that's going to be J40. We got it. Let's keep going. Which of the following expressions is equal to this? This is the product of two binomials, and then I have to do the subtraction. So I think I will go ahead and do that. So 2 root 7 times root 7 is 14, because root 7 times root 7 is 7, times the 2 is 14. Then distributing here is 14. That is -2 root 7. Distributing the 1 is a root 7, followed by a -1. Distribute this negative, gives you -root 7 plus 1. I've got a -2 plus 1 root 7 is -1, but that puts me back at -2 root 7. So probably E, but let's see, 14 -1 plus 1. Yep, E is our answer. The main thing there was that you have to know that when you square a square root, root 7 times root 7, that's root 49, which is just 7. These are complex numbers. Given that I squared is -1, what is this? So we are going to have to distribute and combine like terms. So distributing that -2i, I get -6i. Minus 8i squared, -3, distribute, -6 minus 15i. Combine like terms, negative 21i. Now, this is negative 8i squared. That is a plus 8. Because if you replace the I squared with what it's equal to, negative 1, it turns it positive. And then there's a minus 6. So it looks like I've got 2 minus 21i h right there. 34. Yes, we got it. All right, we're running out of time here. I'm going to keep going as long as I can go. 35. Ice cream shop. Patrons can purchase a single scoop of one ice cream flavor and one topping for $2.99. The owner recorded the number of different ice cream flavors and one topping. Okay. To the nearest 0.01, what's the probability that a randomly selected patron purchased a scoop of vanilla topped with sprinkles? Vanilla and sprinkles. Okay, 77. Now, I have to pay attention to who they're choosing from. A randomly selected patron. So it looks like all of the patrons. So I believe I like 77 because those are the people that got both vanilla and sprinkles. Did it say and? Yeah, this is vanilla and the sprinkles. So 77 over 645. Coming over to the TI-84, 77 divided by 645 is 0.12. It's correct. The one thing that I was hesitating on there, that's correct, Akif. Yeah, the I is the square root of negative 1 on that previous problem. They didn't tell us that. They just told us that I squared was a negative 1. On problems like this, sometimes they will just tell you that that's true, and then you have to know that if you squared both sides of that, you'd get a negative 1. Okay. Yeah, that's it. I don't have much time to go into some other iterations of a problem like that. 36. The equation f of x is graphed in the standard coordinate plane. One of the following defines f of x. So this is what we call a piecewise function. It's got different parts or pieces to it. Notice that when x is equal to negative 2, there's this value of 3. So notice all of these, that says when x is negative 2, it is 3. So does that one. So does that one. Yeah. So they all have the fact that when x is negative 2, it's 3. But notice what is true, that if there is a dot right here, if it's a function, then this has to be an open circle the way it is. It is an open circle. That means that when x is greater than negative 2 going this way, this is saying that y is always going to be 2, right? Y is always going to be 2 when x is greater than negative 2. So it has to be, and this has to be when x is less than negative 2. If you look at these inequalities, this is the one that looks like it has the right inequalities. That when x is greater than negative 2, we get a y value of 2, and x is less than negative 2, I have a y value of 5. But notice these other answer choices have or equals on one or both of them. And they can't be or equals. Well, that's ridiculous, right? It can't be equal. But they have to be greater than and less than because we're not including the negative 2 in that particular interval. So our answer here has got to be letter F. All right, 37. Okay, a restaurant conducted a survey to determine whether customers like or dislike cornbread and whether they like or dislike banana. So they categorized their people according to these two variables, whether they like or don't like those two things, cornbread and banana bread. Given that a customer selected at random from those surveyed likes cornbread, this is what we call a conditional probability. What's the probability that the customer dislikes banana bread? Now, notice that there's a total of 249 customers, but we're not considering all 249 because look what it says. Given that the customer likes cornbread, meaning only consider those who like cornbread. So I'm not considering these people. So you've already told me this person that we picked likes cornbread. What's the probability that they dislike banana bread? It's 82 out of the 160. It's B right here. Notice some answers that people might pick, right? They'd say, oh, the people that dislike banana bread, it's 114 out of 249. No, because it was given that we already knew that they liked cornbread. I restricted my table to just those who liked cornbread. So be on the lookout for those, what we call conditional probabilities, where you're limiting the columns or rows in the table by the condition that they give you. All right, 38. For all positive values of A and B, 8 raised to the A over B. A over B. There. That's how you convert fractional exponents into radicals. Okay, the positive integer 134.608 contains exactly 6 digits. Yes, it does. I'm looking at it. Including this integer, how many 6-digit positive integers contain the digits 1, 3, 4, 6, 7, and 8? Which is basically saying, how many ways could we rearrange those numbers? Right. So if I were to rearrange those numbers, I would have 6 choices here, and then only 5 and 4 and 3 and 2 and 1. So this looks like it is the product of those choices, right? So when you're trying to find how many different combinations you can do when you're making multiple selections, you're going to multiply the number of choices you have at each selection step. So this should be 30, 6 times 5, 30 times 12 times 2. It should be 720. So let's see if that is right. It is. What's the least common denominator for this? To find a common denominator, you need to factor the denominators. That is x plus 1, x minus 1. The other denominator, when you pull the 7 greatest common factor out, you get that. So your GCF has to include all of the distinct factors that you have between the fractions. There's 3 distinct factors: x plus 1, x minus 1, and 7. So it's going to be J right there. 41. Thomas wanted to test whether his coin was unfair. To do this, he flipped the coin 6 times and counted the number of heads and tails. 4 of the flips resulted in heads and 2 resulted in tails. One of the following statements is a correct conclusion based on Thomas's test. Which one? The coins. So it says, he flipped the coin 6 times. I don't think that's my first react before I read the answers. It doesn't seem to be unfair because it doesn't seem to be an unusual number. But let's see. So I'm thinking that the coin. Yeah, our answer has to be not enough flips were performed to accurately predict whether the coin is unfair. Yes, in a situation like this, he would have to do many trials before he could determine whether the number of outcomes that he got was an unusual outcome. So this has to be E. Yeah. And I'm not going to go much more into that one. In triangle ABC below B, segment BD is the altitude from B to segment AC. The measure of A is 60. AD is 10. Okay, it's marked there. DC is 2. Everything's marked. What's the area of triangle ABC? Well, the area, so you need to know the formula for the area of a triangle. 1/2 base times height. And this, I'm going to call this my base of the triangle. And the height is going to be that altitude. Always the height of your triangle that you need for this formula is the perpendicular distance from whatever side you're calling the base. It's the perpendicular distance from the opposite vertex down to that base. So this perpendicular distance, that is what I need. But look, this is a 30, 60, 90 triangle. 60, 90, that makes this 30. So I know how long that is. This is the short leg of the triangle. I multiply on a 30, 60, 90. I multiply the short leg by the square root of 3 to get the longer legs. So that's going to be 10 root 3. So when I plug that into my area formula, it is 1/2. The entire base was 12. 10 plus 2 gives me the entire base of our whole triangle. And then times 10 root 3. So that's going to be 60 root 3. 1/2 times 12 is 6. 6 times 10 is 60 root 3. Okay, what are you talking about there, Akif? Tangent, tangent 60. No, not going to do tangent 60 here. Doing 30. We could do tangent, but we're going to use 30, 60, 90 triangle relationships. That's what we got to use there. 43. The area of any triangle is 1/2 AB sine C, where A and B are lengths of any two sides, and C is the interior angle formed by those two sides. Which of the following is close to the area in square feet of a triangle with side lengths 6.2, 10, 14, angle measurements 23, 39, and 118? So I think what they're wanting us to figure out here is which is the shortest. Let's go ahead and label this 6.2, 10, and 14. The angle 23 would have to go opposite the shortest side. So this would be 23. So I'll stop right there because I now have enough information. I can take 10 times 14 times 0.39 sine 23. So I'm going to do 140 times 0.39. I don't like my answer there. Let me try that again. 6.2, 1/2. Oh, I didn't do 1/2 times 1/2 times 0.5. It was 1/2 AB sine. So it looks like it's 27, right? I had to use this formula. So using that formula, it's 1/2 times 10 times 14 times the sine of the angle sandwiched between those two sides. I would have gotten the same answer if I had picked another two sides and the angle in between those two. But this has to be B, 43. It is 44. What are the slope and y-intercept of the line that goes through 0, 8? 0, 8 is a y-intercept. Okay, here and here. And it also passes through 4, 3, 0 in the standard coordinate plane. All right, I need to calculate the slope. So I'm going to quickly do 0 minus 8 over 4/3 minus 0, negative 8. And dividing by 4/3 is the same as multiplying by 3/4. That's negative 6. G. Uh-oh, I missed it. Oh, yeah, okay. Negative 6 up here. See? If I'm going fast in a problem like that, I very easily could have made that mistake. I'd already limited myself to these two answers, and there was my negative 6 slope. 45. What are the solutions to this equation? Well, I definitely am not going to multiply that out. I'm going to use the square root property. I'm going to subtract 1 on both sides. I am going to square root both sides. Squaring the square root goes away. When I square root a negative 1, I get plus or minus I. The square root of negative 1 is an I. But when I square root, I got to consider positive and negative. I will subtract 1. I get negative 1 plus or minus I. I like D. 45. It is D. 46. What percent of employees in this company have a monthly salary greater than 5? What percent have greater than 5? Oh, I didn't read the part up here. There's a bunch of people. 12 employers, 5 job titles. Okay. All right. So all the salaries are given. Greater than 5,000. There are 9. 9 out of the 12 employees. So 3/4. 75%. Rodrigo and Kim are both employees with the company. Rodrigo had a job title of hardware engineer, has, and Kim has a different job title. The absolute value of the difference between Rodrigo's monthly and Kim's monthly is greater than 800. Let X represent Kim's monthly salary. Which the following statement should, okay. We're subtracting Rodrigo's and Kim's salary, the difference. Who is Rodrigo? He's a hardware engineer. Okay, he's making $5,500. So they're telling me that the absolute value of the difference is greater than 800. Okay, it's probably going to be one of these two answers here. But now, which do I do? 5,500 minus X? X doesn't matter. I just have to get a difference here. Now, the way that you solve inequalities with absolute values, I'm just going to do this just straight up as an algebra problem. I drop the absolute value, and I'm going to make two separate inequalities. That's one of the inequalities that comes from it. The other one is you flip the inequality and you change the sign on the other side like this. If I solve these, if I move the 800 over, it subtracts, and that looks like it's 4,700. Move the X over, X is less than 4,700. I'm liking E because that shows me, this shows me X greater than 4,700, but I already figured that's X less than 4,700. Let's make sure this makes sense. Negative X less than, if I subtract 5,500, I get negative 6,300. Dividing by -1 requires me to flip that inequality, and I get X greater than 6,300. Yeah, so E's the answer here. It's either Kim is either making less than 4,700 or she's making more than 6,300. Yep. Next year, the monthly salary of each employee with the title of software engineer will be increased to 6,500. No other monthly salaries will be increased. That's not nice. Or decreased. And the number of employees with each job title will remain the same. Which following dollar amounts is closest to the change in the mean of the 12 monthly salaries? Okay, software engineers were making 6,000, so they're getting a $500 raise. A $500 raise. And there's 5 of them. So the total salaries are going up by 5 times 500. Monthly salaries are going up by $2,500 total. And they want the change in the mean. Okay, well, the increase of 2,500 is going to be spread evenly then if I'm talking about the average over all 12 people. There were 12 employees. So I want to take that 2,500 and divide it by 12, because in the average, it's going to be spread out to over all 12 employees. So the average is going to go up by 208. And that is J. 49. In the standard XY coordinate plane, the graph of y equals 5x squared is reflected over the x-axis. When you reflect a function over the x-axis, that means you're putting a negative in front of it. That reflects it over the x-axis. And then you're going to translate it right 3 units. That means you replace all of the x's with x minus 3. Yeah. Right there. That accomplishes those 2 transformations. 49, that's it. Okay. 50. What are the real solutions to this equation? Well, a couple of ways we can do it. I'm going to do it this way. I'm going to factor that as the difference in 2 squares, of 2 squares. X squared minus 3, x squared plus 3. And that's equal 0. So I'm going to set both of those equal to 0. When I set that equal to 0, I get x is equal to plus or minus root 3. When I set this one equal to 0, I get x squared equals -3, and therefore when I square root both sides, I get plus or minus I root 3 because the square root of negative 3 is I root 3. So there's 4 solutions. There you go. 50 is H. We're getting close here. No, it says F. Oh, there you go. I didn't read the question. There's my mistake. I would have missed that. All right, AKF, thanks for coming by. What are the real solutions? Real solutions. Oh my gosh, they got me. I can't recall ever doing a practice test where they asked you to restrict yourself to the real solutions. I'm sure they probably have, but yeah, these are imaginary or complex solutions. Those are the real solutions. Boy, oh boy, they got me. I definitely would have missed that one. All right, 51. To the nearest 0.1 second, how many seconds will it take a car to travel a distance of 100 feet, given that it is traveling 45 miles per hour? Well, I'm going to show you the best way to handle this. I'm going to write 45 miles per means divided by 1 hour. I'm going to multiply and convert all of this to feet per second, because it says to the nearest point, how many seconds will travel a distance of 100 feet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, well, every hour has 3,600 seconds. So that's an equality, right? 1 hour is 36. So the hours cancel. But now I need to get rid of miles. 1 mile is 5,280 feet. And the miles would cancel between top and bottom. So I'll take 45 times the 5,280, and then I'll divide by the 3,600 that's on the bottom. That gives me 66 feet per second. 66 feet per second. So how many seconds will it take to travel a distance of 100 feet? It's going to be 100 divided by 66. Right? Because every second I'm going 66 feet. So 100 divided by 66. So about 1.5. 52. The interior diameter and interior height of a cylindrical container are given in inches in the figure below. Water will be poured into the empty container at a rate of 40 pi cubic inches per minute. At this rate, in exactly how many minutes will the container be completely filled? So we want to get the volume. They've given us the volume. That was nice of them. So what we're going to do is we're going to calculate the volume. Pi, the radius is 8, right? Don't forget to cut that diameter in half. So it's going to be pi 8 squared times the height of 10. Are these all in the same units? I'm assuming they are. Inches, cubic inches, yeah. Yeah, okay, so everything's in inches. So this is 64, so this is 640 pi. The volume is 640 pi cubic inches is the volume. Now, we're pouring it in at a rate of 40 pi cubic inches per minute. So every minute we're putting in 40 pi. So we got to take 640 pi and divide it by 40 pi. So 640 divided by 40 is 16. So I'm liking F right here, that it would take 16 minutes. Yeah. For what real value of X is this? So this would be one of those questions, hopefully, that if you were sorting through all of the questions and you're trying to think, which ones could I do? I think you could do this one if you know the rules of exponents, right? So when you multiply like bases, you add those exponents. And here, when you're raising powers to powers, you multiply the exponents. Now, when you're dividing like bases, you subtract. And again, this is 1/9 over here. So this is really 3 to the x plus 4 minus 28, because you subtract the exponents when you divide like bases. Well, this 9 is 3 squared. 1 over 3 squared is the same as 3 to the minus 2, right? When you flip that 1 over 3 squared, you can change the exponent to a -2. Now, why would I do that? Because this is that technique of if the bases match on both sides, then the exponents have to match. And now I'm solving the equation of x minus 24. All right, I'm setting this, which is x minus 24, equal to -2. Is that right? X plus 4 minus 28, x minus 20. Yeah, so I add the 24, I get 22 when I add that to both sides, and I get 53 is D, and it is. All right, 54. Craig writes a check for 18. When he records the check, he accidentally adds 18 instead of subtracting 18, which causes a discrepancy between his check register. Well, that's going to mean he accidentally added 18 instead of, so the difference between adding 18 and subtracting 18, he's going to have $36 more, right? They're trying to get you to go with 18 because, no, but it's, what was supposed to be -18 is positive. That difference between the two values is 36. So 54 is K. 55. In the figure shown below, CE is shared by triangle CDE and a rectangle. The height of CDE from D to CE is 4. Yep, we see that right there. Everything else is marked, 15. Okay, the area of the entire thing is 200 square centimeters. Which following is the closest to CE? So CE is our variable X. All right, the area of the rectangle is 15 times X, length times width. The area of the triangle is 1/2 base, which is X, times the height of the triangle. That vertical distance right there is 4. That's a 2x. The sum of those two areas is 200. So 17x has to be equal to 200. So I go to the calculator, I do 200 divide by 17, and I get 11.8 as my answer. Yep. Okay, in the standard XY coordinate plane below, a circle with radius 2 is centered. Point A is on the circle, terminus line 150. What are the coordinates of A? If you took pre-calculus and you know the unit circle, I think you can get this very quickly. I'm assuming that you have not taken pre-calculus. We are going to use a 30, 60, 90 triangle. If I drop a perpendicular down, because they're wanting me to find the coordinates of A, I know that this hypotenuse is 2. I also know that that angle is 30 degrees because the whole x-axis makes 180. That's a 30, 60, 90 triangle. That would mean then that half of the hypotenuse is the short leg. The short leg times √3 gives me that longer leg. So therefore, the coordinates for this point are -√3, 1. By using a 30, 60, 90 triangle, I get that lickety split. So it's going to be K. And 57, the line plot below shows the number of miles Bob framed each day for a new sidewalk. Okay, after he finished framing, he poured concrete for a ½ mile of sidewalk each day. Which following is closest to the total number of days to pour the concrete? So I got to get the total miles. So I got to add all those things up. Since we're running out of time here, 57 is E. So your strategy here would be to go ahead and add, right? This means there were 4 sections of 1/4. That's 1 mile, right? 4 times 1/4. Anyway, so you add all those to get the total miles and then divide it by 1/2. And that would give you the number of days it took him. Number 58. A store that sells office furniture tracks the number of bookcases sold each day for a year and then prepares the data table below. Which following is closest to the number of bookcases the store can expect to sell in 100 randomly selected days? This is a type of problem called expected value. What you have to do in a situation like this is very simple. You have to take the numeric outcomes of all the different possibilities. Bookcases are either 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you multiply the numeric outcomes times their respective probabilities. once you do the multiplications, you add them, and that's what we call the expected value. So in this case, you have 0 times 0.06, which is 0. 1 times 0.12 is 0.12, plus 0.36, that's 2 times 0.18, plus 3 times 0.34, plus 4 times 0.22. Notice I'm not using any parentheses because the TI-84 knows how to do the order of operations, plus 5 times 0.08. That right there, 2.78, is the sum of the product of the so that's how many bookcases they would expect to sell in a day, sold each day. But it's 100 days then would be 100 times that, 278 J. There you go. Almost there. 59. On the interval 0 to 180, what are the real solutions to this? Well, I'm going to solve this like I would any other factored function that's set equal to 0. You take each factor and set it equal to 0. This does require you maybe to know your unit circle. This would be cosine x equals -1/2. This would be cosine x is equal to the number 1. A couple of ways you can do this. If you know your unit circle, you know that that's 120 degrees. Remember, we're only talking about 0 to 180. There's another angle within the unit circle for which cosine is -1/2, but we're only talking about quadrants 1 and 2. So that's it. Now, if you don't know the unit circle, you don't even know what I'm talking about when I say the unit circle, what you could do is take the inverse cosine of -1/2, making sure that you are in radians mode, or sorry, degrees mode. So I'm going to put this calculator in degrees mode, and then I'm going to take the inverse cosine of -0.5. And it does give me 120. And then if you took the inverse cosine of 1, you get 0. And yeah, those are your two answers right there, 0 and 120. All right, almost done. 60, the circumference of a circle is 16 pi. What is the perimeter in feet of a square inscribed in the circle? All right. So I got a square, I got a circle inscribed, meaning it's going to fit right in there like that. Well, if the circumference is 16 pi, I need to know that circumference is 2 pi r. So if the circumference is 16 pi, then that means that the radius is 8. If the radius is 8, what is the perimeter of this? Wait a minute. Inscribed in the circle. Whoa, whoa, whoa. The square is inscribed. That's a little different. Okay. Yeah. How do I figure this out? Look at this. Since the square is inscribed, I'm going to draw that diameter right there. That's the diameter of the circle. Well, we figured the radius is 8, so that means that this whole diameter is 16. This, when you draw a diagonal in a square, you make it 45, 45, 90. So that would mean then if that's 16, this is 16 over root 2. And it wants the perimeter of that square. So each side is 16 over root 2. So I got to take 16 over root 2 times 4. That's 64 over root 2. Now, none of my answers are over there, so I probably have to rationalize this by multiplying by root 2 over root 2. That gives me 64 root 2. 2, that would be 32 root 2. That's a tough one. 60. Hopefully it's K. It is K. All right, so just to recap, that square was inscribed inside the circle. I had to first get the radius 8, then realize there would be the diameter of 16, and that makes a 45, 45, 90. And the relationship between the hypotenuse and the legs of a 45, 45, 90 is either a multiplier or divider of root 2. So if you're going from the hypotenuse to the leg, you divide by root 2. Well, that is it, students. We have reached the end. I hope that was helpful to you, and good luck tomorrow if you're taking the ACT. If I can ever be of help to you, let me know. And here's some contact information I think I have coming up here for you so that you could reach out to me if you need to. Take care, everybody. See you next time.